So there's a pair of bones at the front, okay, right over the nose region, and so those would be the nasals. And then there's a pair of bones here that lie over the orbits, frontals. And then normally there's a pair of bones behind the frontals here, which would be the parietals. This fish only has one bone in the middle, so they're fused. And Amia actually is fairly variable in some of these bones. If we look at this one, that's why I just took a peek, you can see there's the paired parietals that are the normal.
Then what are these?
These are the extrascapulars.
Okay.
Okay. So these are the paired parietals here. Go back to this guy. There's a circumorbital series, which in these guys, mostly behind and below and in front of the orbit. So there's a big bone that's right behind the orbit, right here, and that would be the post-orbital. That's this one. And then below that is the suborbital. Okay. And then in front of the orbit is this large bone here, and this would be the lacrimal. Okay. And then there's usually 2 or 3 little bones right under the orbit, and those are the subinfraorbitals. And those we don't find normally in other animals, but Emia's got them in there. Okay. Then there's the upper jaw series, and there's bone at the front of the jaw, which actually doesn't show up very well in those. But yeah, it's better on here. It's this one here with all these teeth, and that would be the premaxilla, and then behind that, the maxilla, and just above the maxilla, there's a separate little bone there, and that would be the supramaxilla. Yeah. Okay. And in Amia, the maxilla, you can see it actually can rotate at this point, and so when Amia opens its mouth, the maxilla does swing forward and help close the gape for suction feeding. Okay. But the premaxilla is fixed and doesn't move in these guys. Lower jaw. Okay, I'll go back to him. I like this one because it's usually the sutures are fairly easily seen on it. This one maybe not quite so much, but the main bone of the lower jaw carrying the teeth would be the dentary. Yes, and in the Walker it calls it the dentary something else. Infradentary or infradenta. Just dentary is good for us. At the back of the lower jaw, right in here, there's another bone at the angle of the lower jaw, and that would be the angular. And just above that is a little bone right here, and that is the supraangular. Yes, this little guy right here. Okay. Dermal palate. Okay, this is challenging because the palate is inside the mouth, and it's hard to see. See how these guys are. Oh, this one's actually pretty good. So some of them you can actually look in the mouth and you can see that there's a whole series of teeth lying right in the midline. Can you see that at all?
Yeah.
Underlying the chondrocranium on a bone. And that bone would be the, can you see that at all? I can't tell which way I'm angling.
A parasphenoid?
That's the parasphenoid, yeah, I'm trying to point to it. Okay, so I just wanted to point out, you can kind of see it peering in here. It's pretty challenging though. So an easier place to see these bones are in the sagittally sectioned skull. So we can look here on the roof of the mouth, and running right down the midline here is the parasphenoid. You can see how it just lies on the underside of the chondrocranium. Okay. And then at the front of the palate, there's a bunch of teeth that are being carried on another bone, and that bone would be the vomer. Exactly. That's right in there. Okay. And then off to the side here, actually connected to the part of the upper jaw, is this palatal bone that you can see right there, and that is the pterygoid. Can you see that at all? And so just to show you one other view of this, This is an upper jaw seen from the inside, and this here is the pterygoid, this bone. Okay. So there. So it really does exist. Okay. So those ones are challenging, but I just want people to be aware that there actually are bones inside the mouth. And when I stopped a couple of years, I tried not doing that, and people just didn't realize that. So that's important. Opercular series. Okay. So there's a big bone right at the front of the opercular series here that kind of arches around, and that is the preopercular. Yep. And then the bone here that covers the gills is the main bone is the operculum or opercular. Yes, that's this one. And below that is the suboperculum, and then this one I have wrong on the board, so I apologize for that. It's the interoperculum, not the infraoperculum. Okay, so that's the interoperculum there. And then we have a whole series of branchiostegal rays here, like this, and one big bone right in the midline between the angles of the lower jaw, and that is the median gular. Okay. Then it says pectoral girdle, and that's just to sort of notice that there's a pectoral girdle. Now on this side of the skull there is no pectoral girdle, but here there is. So this thing that's kind of dangling there is the pectoral girdle, meaning that's where the pectoral fin would be attached. And the pectoral girdle sits right behind the operculum and basically forms the back of that opercular chamber. So the gills are all in front of the pectoral girdle, just like in a shark. And this is what the operculum closes against when they close their operculum. So there's pectoral girdle there. And when we do the skeleton of the limbs or the fins, we'll do the pectoral girdle and the bones that make it up. But do notice that the pectoral girdle connects to the back of the skull, unlike Tiktaalik that had a neck. These guys do not. Okay. Chondrocranium. Look for it in the back of the dried skulls. Okay, so you can look in this skull and it's kind of all cruddy back there. I picked this one out because it's very clean by comparison. And you can look into the back and see the chondrocranium pretty nicely there. So there's this bone right at the base of the skull, right here, the base of the occipital region. So that would be the base occipital. And then over to the side of the occipital region are bones here and here paired, and those would be the ex-occipitals. Okay, these guys. This does show up much nicer on this than most of the skulls. And then off to the side of the ex-occipitals, forming the back of the otic capsule, is a bone here, and that is the opisthotic. Exactly. That is this one. You see that? Kenzie's got her phone in action. Am I pointing at the right thing, or did my probe move? You can't see it? No, you got it? Okay, cool. So that's the chondrocranium. And, you know, on the sagittally sectioned skull here, you can really see that the chondrocranium is all shriveled up in there. It's got some ossifications in it, and the rest of it was cartilage. And you can see how it's really just in these amia, very distinct from the dermal bones that surround it and kind of encased by the dermal bones. So I like that. And you can see here, this is the, indeed, basioccipital and ex-occipital, and opisthotic is hard to see from this side. It's around on there. But anyway, yeah, you can see that there is a chondrocranium lying inside of the skull. Okay, and then splanchocranium, not too tough. From the outside of the skull, in the mandibular arch, the main bone that you see is this one right down by the, forming the jaw joint right there, and that would be the, we've got a disagreement here. I go for quadrate. Yeah, so this is, because this is upper jaw. That's the quadrate of the upper jaw. Okay, and right up above the quadrate is another bone, also ossified in the palatal quadrate cartilage, and that's called the metapterygoid. So that's up in here. Okay. And then down in the lower jaw, where we can't see it, inside of the lower jaw is the articular. Okay. But I do have here my disarticulated skeleton. So I actually